Okay, so stories are like how we shape the world around us. So if I give you the same fact, right, and the way that we interpret it, the way that we interpret any event is we apply a narrative to it. So it's literally the way that we that we give context to things, you know. And I use the example, my mom is really religious, and if something bad happens to her, and if something bad happens to me, right, something bad happens to me, I go, ah, screw this, and something happens to my mom, and she goes, thank you, God, for the opportunity to practice patience, right? So she is living in this story, right, and for her, this is a narrative that she believes. So anything that happens, she responds completely different than I do. And that's what's so interesting, that stories shape how we act in the world. Stories give us context to make sense of the world. And that's one chapter of it, or one side. And the other side of it is the stories that we read and the stories that we believe and the stories that we consume really shape our behavior. Right, so and I'm talking more sort of pop culture stories, right? So mass media, and in the mass media, and that's popular TV, movies, music, things like that. They really shape our beliefs of ourselves, of the world around us. They shape what we buy. They shape where we go. And all this is attached to really interesting data, right? So after Harry Potter came out, tourism to London shot up by like 20 or 30%. After Cosby Show, attitudes towards African Americans shifted. After Will and Grace, attitudes towards people who were gay and lesbian shifted. And all these different things, right? So we can pinpoint in culture when there was popular culture that said, you know what, America, you can now start thinking about this, and you can now think this. And we're totally shaped by that. We're totally manipulated by mass media. So that's the bad news. The bad news is stories are shaping the world that we live in. The good news is we have the choice to think about what stories we consume, what stories that we listen to. And secondly, if we know that stories shape people's behaviors, if we know that stories impact people, then we can share our stories, and we can tell stories that matter, and we can tell stories that impact the world for better. And I think one of the keys is recognizing that the stories that you believe most likely are not defined by you. You did not write the story. You were not the author of that story. And secondly, it was designed by someone probably to get you to buy something, right? Something I think about a lot is masculinity. And I thought I wasn't manly enough because I wasn't buff, because I didn't have a nice car, because I didn't drink or party too much, because I didn't sleep with a ton of women, like all these things, right? And what I realized, one, I never wrote that. To me, masculinity is someone who's communicative and kind. It's someone like my father, right? So my father is kind and emotional, and he's a brilliant man. But still, I didn't look at that, right? And I listened to this other definition that was written for me by ad agencies and people trying to get me to buy things, right? So one, I realized I'm not the author of this story, and two, I can present a counter narrative in the world. And when you present this counter narrative, when you flip the script, you see a ton of people who think the way you do. I've started saying, hey, you guys, do you ever think about masculinity? Do you ever think about how TV tells us men are a certain thing and that's not very good? And people are like, yes, of course I think about that. And here's this magazine, here's these books, and here's this TV show, here's these things with us challenging that really popular notion.